You were already inside the room before you realized the door was never open. The fire should not be burning this late. Not out here. Not in the middle of nothing. Not in a place that stopped being a place years ago. Collapsed walls, a caved roof, the kind of structure that exists only because the trees around it forgot to finish swallowing it whole. But the fire is burning, and in front of it, a man is sitting. And in front of the man, there is something that should not exist. It has the body of a person, the head of something else entirely, and its stomach is open, and it is full of fire. You cannot look away. You already know you are going to wish you had. The town of Harlow Creek, West Virginia, sits far enough into the hills that cell service arrives as a rumor and leaves without confirming anything. 43 families, one general store, a 2-room school that closed 18 months ago and never offered a reason anyone believed. The people there are not unfriendly. They wave when you pass. They bring casseroles when someone falls ill. They keep their lawns trimmed and their porches swept, and their faces arranged in the particular expression of people who have decided that whatever is happening is not their business to question. For as long as anyone could remember, the man who held the town together was named Eldridge Kane. Not officially. He held no title. He sat on no committee. He was simply the man you went to when the well ran dry, or the livestock stopped eating, or the fever in your child would not break after 3 days of medicine that should have worked. He lived at the edge of the property line where Harlow Creek ended and the tree line began. A clapboard house, a woodpile always perfectly stacked, a garden that produced twice what any garden on those grounds had a right to. People said it was talent. People said it was dedication. People said a lot of things that were easier than the truth. Eldridge was old. How old, nobody could say with certainty. He had been old when the people who were now old were children. He spoke about things that happened decades back with the specific clarity of someone who had been present. He never corrected anyone who assumed he was simply a well-preserved man in his 70s. He never confirmed it either. The town believed Eldridge kept them safe. In a way, he did. In the way a lock keeps you safe while something waits on the other side of the door, learning patience. There was one thing the town did not discuss, not even with each other, not even in the careful way people discuss things they are pretending not to discuss. The children, the number of children, how it kept being wrong, how a family would have a son, and 2 years later, quietly, there was one less place set at the table, and no one at the church said a word about it, and the mother's eyes changed into a shape that grief alone cannot make. It had been happening for a long time, long enough that Harlow Creek had simply absorbed it, the way a body absorbs a splinter it cannot expel, sealing over it, building tissue around it, pretending it was never foreign at all. No one from outside had thought to look, until Marcus Webb. Marcus Webb was 29 years old and had spent the last 3 years as a field investigator for the state's Department of Child and Family Welfare.
He drove a county-issue sedan with a cracked dashboard and kept a thermos of gas station coffee in the cup holder that he never actually finished. He was the kind of person who read the footnotes, who asked the follow-up question that the previous interviewer had not thought to ask, who filed the reports that sat in the pile and pulled them back out again 6 weeks later when something kept not adding up. The file on Harlow Creek was thin. That was the problem. For a district that had shown a documented 62% reduction in school-aged children over 14 years, a number that had no demographic explanation, no corresponding out-migration data, no uptick in family relocations, the paper trail was almost perfectly empty. Almost. There was a name that appeared on the edges of things, in the margin of an old county health form, in the witness line of a property transfer, in the handwritten log of a school attendance record listed simply as local advisor. Eldridge Kane. Every time. For 40 years.
Marcus took the file. He refilled his thermos. He drove 3 hours into the hills on a Wednesday in early October when the trees were just beginning to turn and the light through the windshield was the particular amber of something ending. He did not call ahead. Field investigators who call ahead find people who have had time to arrange their faces. The town was quiet in a way that felt chosen rather than natural. Clean streets, curtains that moved when he parked and then went still. A man outside the general store who watched him walk to the door of the town hall and said nothing and kept watching when Marcus went inside. The town clerk, a woman named Dottie, was pleasant in the automatic way of someone running a script. She answered every question he asked. She offered coffee. She smiled at appropriate intervals. And she did not call Eldridge Kane. But when Marcus stepped outside to check a signal that did not exist, he noticed her hand was already on the phone before the door had finished closing. He planted a detail here on purpose. He asked Dottie, casually, which road went up past the old quarry. She told him. Then she mentioned with elaborate casualness that there was nothing interesting up that way, just overgrown property, old foundation stones. Nobody went there. Marcus wrote it in his notes. That afternoon he walked the town. He watched. He counted. He spoke to 2 men who sat outside the hardware store and got the same warm blankness that Dottie had given him. Answers without information, hospitality without opening. And at the end of the main street, next to a dried-up drainage ditch, he found 3 children, elementary school age, playing in the dirt. They were building something, small figures from clay arranged in a circle, one in the center, slightly larger than the others, shaped into a kneeling position. Marcus crouched down. He asked what they were playing. The oldest one, a boy of maybe 8, looked up at him with an expression that did not belong on a child's face. Flat, certain, old. "Feeding time," the boy said. Marcus stood up slowly. His thermos suddenly felt very heavy in his hand. That evening, Eldridge Kane came to find him. Marcus was sitting in the only room the town had to offer visitors, a converted spare bedroom in Dottie's house, clean and airless, when the knock came. He opened the door and found an old man, tall once, bent now at the shoulders in the specific way of height that has been carried too long, white hair, hands that did not match his age, smooth, unspotted, still.
eyes that were the wrong color for the light in the hallway. He introduced himself. He shook Marcus's hand. His grip was dry and warm and slightly too firm for someone who moved like he did. They sat in Dottie's small kitchen, and Dottie disappeared the way people disappear when they have been told to. Eldridge offered Marcus something to drink, and Marcus watched him pour it and did not pick up the glass. The conversation was pleasant, too pleasant. Eldridge knew things about Marcus that Marcus had not offered: his department, his supervisor's name, the number of open cases on his desk. He framed it as small-town communication, the way news travels on a party line, the way people look out for each other. He smiled while he said it. Marcus asked about the children, the enrollment numbers, the patterns. Eldridge nodded slowly, the way someone nods when they are deciding what version to give you. He talked about rural poverty, about young families leaving for better opportunities, about the natural attrition of small communities in the modern economy. Every sentence was correct. Every sentence was a door closing. Marcus watched Eldridge's eyes while he talked. The irises were not quite steady. Something moved behind them at irregular intervals, like a pilot light he cannot find the source of. He thanked Eldridge. He went back to the spare room. He listened to the house go quiet, and then he lay on the bed staring at the ceiling for 3 hours because sleep was not coming, and because something about the glass he had not drunk was still bothering him, and because he kept thinking about the children in the dirt. Feeding time. At 2 in the morning, he saw it. From the window. Past the edge of the tree line, through the black spaces between the trunks, light. Not electric, not a flashlight. Something older than both of those. Orange-red and absolutely still, burning somewhere in the distance past the quarry road that Dottie had told him nobody went to. He was moving before he had finished deciding to. The path through the trees was not a path. It was the absence of undergrowth in a specific direction, as if something had been clearing it regularly longer than the trees had been tall. Marcus followed it with his phone light off, using only the glow from ahead, stepping around roots by feel. When he reached the ruin, he stopped.
The walls were stone. 2 still standing, 2 collapsed into rubble that had been there long enough to grow moss. In the center, a fire burned in a shallow pit, and the smoke from it moved straight up with no wind to catch it, which was wrong because there was wind. He could feel it on his face, but the smoke refused it. And beside the fire was the statue. His dreaming mind had not built it. He had not seen it before in any photograph or record or form. And yet, standing there in the dark at the edge of the ruin, he had the absolute and wordless certainty that he had been here before, that some part of him remembered this fire, this shape, this weight in the air. The figure was roughly human below the neck. Above it, wide, curved, unmistakably the angular silhouette of an animal's skull. The stomach was open. The cavity glowed from inside. Eldridge Kane sat before it with his eyes closed. His lips moved with no sound. Marcus stepped behind the nearest wall, pressed his back against the stone, slowed his breathing. Then Eldridge spoke without turning around. "You can come out, Mr. Webb." The voice was completely calm. "You've come far enough. You might as well finish it." Marcus came out from behind the wall. His legs were working, but he was not entirely sure how. Eldridge had not moved. He sat in front of the fire with the same stillness as the smoke, present, upright, immune to the ordinary forces that moved other things. He did not look at Marcus. He looked at the statue. "You want to know what this is?" Eldridge said. "I want to know where the children are." For the first time, Eldridge smiled. Not the kitchen smile, something underneath it, older and without warmth. "They're everywhere," he said. "They're in the grain, they're in the grain. They're in whatever's kept this valley fed and clear and free of the particular miseries that eat other places alive." He gestured at the fire. "This is a transaction, Mr. Webb. Not a mystery, not superstition, a transaction. Energy exchanged. Something given, something returned." Marcus's voice came out steadier than he expected. "You have been taking children." "Offering," Eldridge said. "The word matters. Not to their mothers." Something passed across Eldridge's face. Not guilt. Something more uncomfortable than guilt. Recognition, as if the argument was not new to him, as if he had made it once himself before he had found his way around it. "I have been doing this for 31 years. Before me, my father. Before him, the man who taught my father. This valley does not flood. The blight that took every surrounding county in 1987 did not touch one stalk here. 3 documented disease outbreaks that wiped out communities 30 miles south. Harlow Creek did not lose a single adult." He paused. "The math is not complicated." "The math," Marcus said, "is about children." "Everything is about children. That is rather the point. The most valuable thing, the thing without compromise, that is what the offering requires." He looked at Marcus for the first time. His eyes in the firelight were the color of something just before it ignites. "You don't understand what you interrupted. 7 more years. After 7 more years it would have been complete. The original seeker's promise would have been fulfilled, and no more offerings would have been necessary, ever. The valley would have been permanently protected." 7 more children, Marcus said. Still no answer. Marcus looked at the statue, at the open cavity, at the fire burning inside a stone belly on a night that had gotten absolutely still. He thought about the boy in the dirt with old eyes, feeding time. He thought about the attendance record, the mothers in the church, the expression that grief alone could not make. And then he heard footsteps behind him. He turned. 3 men from the town, men he had nodded to outside the hardware store that afternoon. They were carrying nothing. They did not need to. The weight of Harlow Creek was in their faces. 20 years of arranged belief, of chosen silence, of the transaction that had required them to become something else. They moved toward Marcus. And then a 4th figure stepped out of the trees. An old man, older than Eldridge, impossibly so, hands that shook, eyes that had turned inward with age, a face that seemed held together by the specific tension of someone who had been waiting. He was carrying a jar in both hands,
something thick and dark inside it. He looked at Eldridge Kane, and his voice, when it came, was barely air. "My grandson," he said. 1993. You told us he was chosen." Eldridge's composure moved, just slightly, just once, like a fault line remembering it exists.
"You told us he was chosen," the old man said again. "You told us the offering would protect us." He took one more step. "My daughter has not slept a full night in 30 years. The three men stopped. They looked at Eldridge. They looked at the old man. And then, one by one, they looked at the statue. The fire inside it was still burning, still steady, still patient. Eldridge stood. He was very tall suddenly, or seemed very tall, the firelight stretching his shadow up the broken wall until it covered the statue and kept going. His eyes were entirely wrong now. The red in them was not a reflection. "You do not understand what you are ending," he said. "If this stops, tell me what you told my daughter. Tell her son's name. Say it out loud, Eldridge, in front of your God. Say my grandson's name and tell me this was worth it." The silence lasted a very long time. Eldridge did not say the name. Marcus moved. He was not thinking, or he was thinking only in the oldest way, the part of the mind that functions before language. He grabbed the fire ring at the statue's base. The stone burned his hands. He pulled. The statue fell. The sound it made when it hit the ground was not the sound of stone on stone. It was wrong in a way that Marcus's mind refused to categorize. The fire in its stomach scattered across the rubble and went out, not slowly, not section by section, but all at once, like a breath cut short. Eldridge made a sound that had no human name. His legs went out from under him. The three men from town were already backing into the trees, and the old man, still holding his jar, lowered himself very carefully to his knees in the ash and dirt, and held the jar to his chest, and did not make a sound. What happened in the weeks that followed Harlow Creek would occupy 3 county jurisdictions, 2 state agencies, and a federal review that was still ongoing when Marcus filed his final incident report and quietly requested reassignment to a different district. Eldridge Kane was taken into custody at the ruin site. He did not resist. By the time any official vehicle reached Harlow Creek, something in him had changed in a way that no medical vocabulary adequately covered. He was present, responsive, cooperative, and entirely empty. Whatever had been behind his eyes, the moving pilot light, was gone. The doctors called it acute neurological collapse. Marcus did not argue with them. The town came apart slowly, in the way of things held together by a single thread. Families talked. Then families talked to investigators. Records were found. Eldridge had kept them, meticulously, in a tin box buried under the foundation of his house. Dates, names, methods. 31 years of entries in the careful handwriting of a man who believed absolutely in what he was doing. The children could not be returned. Nothing Marcus had done changed that. He knew it.
He sat with it in the particular way you sit with things that cannot be fixed, which is not comfortably, and not quietly, and not without it costing something permanent. The old man with the jar, his name was Gus, Marcus learned later, had been planning to come forward for years, had stopped himself each time out of the fear that Eldridge would know, that something would happen to his daughter, that the thread of protection, however its price was extracted, would snap if he pulled on it. He had been pulling on it from the inside for 3 decades. He was the one who had called Marcus's department, an anonymous tip on an untraceable landline, 3 sentences and a hang-up. It was Gus who had gathered the other men and followed Marcus into the trees. It was Gus who had said his grandson's name there in the ruin for the first time in 30 years. The detail Marcus had planted without knowing. That morning, outside the general store, one of the men he had spoken to had an old photograph tucked behind the visor of his truck. A child, maybe 5 years old, laughing at something outside the frame. He noted it and moved on. He understood it later. Every family in Harlow Creek had a photograph like that. Tucked away, carried quietly, never shown, because showing it required saying out loud what they were still not sure they were allowed to say. There is a specific kind of fear that has nothing to do with monsters. It is the fear of the bargain, the fear that the thing keeping you safe is the same thing consuming you, that the protection and the threat are not 2 things in tension. They are the same transaction running in both directions at once, that somewhere along the line, without a single moment you can point to, you traded the thing you were protecting everyone from into the center of the protected circle itself. Harlow Creek did not have a devil in the woods. It had a man who had convinced an entire community that the devil in the woods and the man protecting them from it were not the same person. That is not a supernatural story. That is a story that happens everywhere that fear is old enough and the night is dark enough and someone credible enough stands up and says, "Trust me. I know what you have to give up. I know what it will cost, and I promise you, it is worth it." The last entry in Eldridge Kane's tin box was dated 3 weeks before Marcus arrived. It did not name a child. It named a year. 7 more. That was all it said. 7 more years. The box is in evidence storage now. The tin is slightly rusted at the corners. The handwriting inside is very neat. And somewhere in the hills above what used to be Harlow Creek, on a road that county maps do not include, there is a ruin. The walls that were standing are still standing. The walls that collapsed are still collapsed. The fire ring is empty. The statue is gone. Catalogued, sealed, held in a facility that Marcus does not have clearance to visit. He asked once what they were going to do with it. He was told it was being stored, evaluated, that a determination had not been made. He did not ask again. Some things are kept rather than ended, and the difference between those 2 words is the whole story. This is After the Horror, and you already know the bargain being made is never the one they told you about.